Great. Hello, everybody. This is Between Two Teachers, and our episode here today on Friday, July the 23rd. We're in the middle of summer vacation for a lot of people, and we are bringing you the news as we see it in the perspective of education. So my name is Consuelo Lara.
And I'm Madeline Cronenberg. And as always, we begin with our land acknowledgement. We pause to acknowledge that we have gathered on the ancestral territory of Petition, part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karkan-speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland. We offer our respect to their elders and all Ohlone people of the past and present. And so here we are this week in education. And what's interesting this week nationally, when you look at what people are measuring nationally and looking at nationally, the first thing is masking. Children, because we go back to the coronavirus is not vanquished, it's not gone. So the question is how you're responding to it. And unvaccinated children are at risk. They're at risk to themselves, and they're at risk to everybody else. But masking is now this big political issue. So there are states that have required masking. There are states that are banning requiring masking, and everything in between. So California is right in there. California, of course, comes back to the districts, but West Contra Costa is requiring masking. And I think most public school districts in California will require masking.
Yeah, and in terms of the county Office of Education, Lynn Mackey's put out her newsletter and saying just that the Department of Health has issued guidelines, and they're pretty much in link with the CDC, but that each district is going to have to come up with their policy about the masking. And I thought this was interesting, and offer alternative educational opportunities or options for students who will not wear a mask or other coverings. So that's interesting.
Right. So it's sort of, the world is changing now because it's so clear that the epidemic and the deaths are among unvaccinated folks. And then there are those that really cannot get vaccinated for all kinds of really serious medical reasons. And they are the ones who everyone is really putting at risk by not choosing to get vaccinations. And so now, businesses are making decisions. The NFL made a decision. And I think this is going to be interesting how many people follow that. The NFL made a decision that if you're not vaccinated, you're not going to play.
There you go. They all need to do that.
That's it. I mean, and if they can do it, and what do they only care about money. I mean, this is not that they're worried about the health. They don't want a whole team they don't want to lose a game, right? They don't want to have games canceled.
Yep. And it's
right.
Thing. Just get vaccinated.
Yeah. Get vaccinated. Right. And anyhow, but the other part of it now, until everybody is vaccinated, which they aren't, is masking. And how long who knows how long we will continue to mask? I don't know. I mean, I think at this point in time, it's really very unclear.
It is. It really is. Because you watch the news and it changes all the time. Again, it's going.
Right. Because this is in response to a variant, right? A virus variant. And this is nature just sort of taking over. And this Delta variant, and there are other variants around the planet that are all coming here because we're traveling again. People are bringing things and moving around and doing things, and that's going to happen. But it's a big anyway. In education right now, the conversation isn't about whether schools will open or close. which will happen if the variant spreads again and there are so many unvaccinated people that people start overflowing the hospitals. Because remember, that's why we closed.
That's right.
Because and that's happening in parts of the country,
Yeah,
in the unvaccinated parts of the country. So,
right.
so the masking policies are there. And so you have states with a mask requirement, like, and they're all the Democratic states, right? Washington has a mask requirement. California does. New Mexico does. North Carolina, Virginia, New York, and Connecticut. That's where the masking requirements are. And then there are other places that absolutely have they've banned the mask requirement. Mask mandates ban, where it's illegal to have a mask requirement, right? And that's like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Arizona, Utah.
Florida.
Florida doesn't have it. It
Oh, it
doesn't
doesn't have that.
Florida says it's a local thing.
Oh,
Florida
okay.
says it's a local thing. So anyway, that's where the news is right now. And we won't be talking about anything but masks for, I think, a long time, until we finally come to a conclusion that maybe that's what we're all just going to be using for the future. So that's the big one. Then in school reopening in West Contra Costa, the reopening plan has been put forward. They're getting readier every day to come back. A lot of people are on vacation right now, but there's also a lot of work being done by the new superintendent, reorganizing his team and coming out with the new reorganization chart. And as he certainly was clear the other day when he spoke on the Concilio Latino conversation. So if you want to hear from him, I will put the link in down here so that anybody who's interested, who hasn't watched Dr. Hurst, can watch him again. But we really enjoyed having the conversation with him at the Concilio Latino.
Absolutely. He was very thorough in what, because bringing up the structure of the organization and the movement. So he's very hands-on, and he shares it all. So it was a really good presentation on his part. Yeah.
He is very hands-on. And so I was going to just this week talk a little bit about other school boards and issues that have happened in school boards, actually nationally and statewide. The one that I wanted to follow up on, because I talked about it before, is in Florida, the Hillsborough School Board, the one that had decided to not renew several of their charter schools.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Well, they undid that decision this week.
Oh, wow.
Charter schools are back.
Not surprised.
Charter schools are back because Mr. DeSantis and Mr. Cochran, the state was suing them. The charter schools were suing them. So those schools will remain open. But I think the point that they were trying to make, and if you listen to their board meetings just to hear what their board members were saying, is this doesn't provide a solution to them to handle the funding issues. And this has been the big problem that people have with charter schools. It's never been with the reason that they were brought into existence, which is innovation and better services for kids, but that the way it's set up, they pull money away from other children.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In a way that the parents who send the children to the charter schools are not trying to do. But it's the system, the political system that's been set up. And that's what that school board in Hillsborough was trying to address. But this wasn't the successful way to address it.
And, and it highlights that the bottom line about charter schools is money. That is the bottom line, because all the money they take from public education for the charter schools does not all go to the charter school students. A lot of it goes to the corporations, the CEOs, a lot of it. This is a money-making.
This is the thing. And actually, there was a bill in Congress this week, a federal bill that took money away from charter schools that were giving money to for-profit companies, right? And in California, there aren't any specifically for-profit charter schools. But the bigger picture is there are people who make a lot of money on the charter schools, whether they are technically for profit or not, because the charter management organizations that the California bill had attempted to eliminate, they are where all the money goes, right? They take the cream off the top, and not every charter school has one, but the ones that do, this is, 17% of the money that's supposed to be there to educate your child goes to a management team that has no limit on what it can pay its own staff, pay itself.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems. So that one of the bills this week that the charter school industry, the National Charter Alliance and charter schools folks are actively trying to change is that limitation in the federal bill. And so they've got petitions all over to try to stop that. So that's something to pay attention to. But it was put into the optimistic thing is it was put into the federal and moved through the Appropriations Committee.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. Another thing that happened in California in the charter world, or is about to happen, is we're going to have our recall, and we're having it. The governor is being recalled, and the governor's recall, there are 46 people running against him. And among the 46 people running against him is Kevin Kiley, a gentleman who's a representative from the Sacramento area. Mr. Kiley is a very strong representative of school choice and the charter movement. Very strong. I think he's got a 100% rating with them.
Wow.
And he has shared that they are in the process of bringing a basically voucher legislation to the California ballot.
Yeah.
And that is a huge issue. So this is going to come back up next year. They're going to start collecting, and it's the California School Choice Foundation that's about to do it. And once again, what that will do is in fact hurt our public district schools, because what it will do is grow the industry where you will be able to get your money for your child and take that money and with your child out of the public school. You will be able to go to homeschooling. You will be able to take it to private schools. And it's measured in other states now. I think Arizona is doing it, Ohio. You can also take it to your local religious school. There's no limitation on that. So what it does is it changes the pot, changes the size of the pot, how many families then are going to use this, and it changes our value of having a public education system as we've always had in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if that's definitely it's going to take money away from public education. But I wonder if some people would leave charter schools in order to use a voucher.
Well, what they'll do, I think the biggest proponents are homeschools, but there are a lot of homeschool charter schools. So what it appears is that the homeschoolers would get their money and then pay the charter school folks to provide the curriculum that the average mom who is a homeschooler wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah. So they still have their fingers in the pot there.
Yeah, it's just that the pot changes, right? So I mean, it's just something for us to be really aware of how many folks are there and where the money is going to come from for that effort. That is definitely on its way. Mr. Kiley was very excited about saying this was coming up, and I'm sure that his votes will come from folks who support this. And I mean, it's going to be part of his. He's not bashful about saying how excited he is about it. Although he didn't make the formal announcement yet, but it's on the other folks' website, so sure. It's not secret.
I really like the Democratic Party's commercial about the recall, where they really link, the Republicans, the insurrection, all of these. It's kind of that whole group of people pushing for this, and where it's coming from. So Yeah, so it's, we all got to work hard on this one.
Right.
Call to
And
action,
they're all linked together. This is the thing. Everything is linked together.
isn't it?
Like, so we have talked about testing, and we did a testing webinar around the racist history of testing and how testing needs to be changed in the United States and eliminated. Really, the high stakes testing needs to go, and we need to move into project-based learning. So this week came to my attention that the Walton Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation have also arrived at the conclusion that testing needs to change. And they have started a new group that will create that change.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
really? Okay.
Yes. So we need to just keep paying attention, because of course they have. Why wouldn't they? They can, they've got the wherewithal to do whatever they want to do.
They want.
And they're not afraid to do it. So they are doing it. And
Yeah.
they got a big announcement. It was a big announcement. They're going to make this is the group you can now look to make the changes. I don't think so.
No, they are not the ones to look forward for the changes.
Right.
No.
What they have is a very fancy website. They're gonna, they're gonna do lots of surveys. They're gonna have information from a lot of different groups. But what we have talked about when we've talked about testing is using teacher testing, using like elevating the classroom teachers, right? Not setting up this other alternative system. I mean, it's still going to be a corporate foundation-led system, whatever it is they're going to come up with.
Yeah. Because the
So
bottom line is they need something to compare schools with, and so whatever they come up with is that's the end result. You got to be able to weed out,
Their organization is called Assessment for Good.
Yeah, no. There's no good can come of it.
No. I mean,
Okay.
it's just, it says, we seek to transform the systems and structures necessary for culturally affirming assessment of Black and Latino students and their social, emotional, and learning development.
Oh, geez.
So we all just need to pay attention.
Pay
It's,
attention, see what they're
right.
doing.
The assessment conversation is also bigger than, it's growing, right? It's growing, and they're hearing it. They're hearing that it's racist, but they're not the folks that need to get in and fix this way.
Yeah. Jeez.
But that's what's happening there. The only other two of the school boards I just wanted to talk about, because this is school board week.
Yeah.
Where is it? In Stockton. Stockton's grand jury issued a report basically against the Stockton Unified School Board. And it was talking about the Stockton Unified School Board being dysfunctional because of the high amount of superintendent turnover that they have had, and that they believe that the board as it is right now is dysfunctional. Also because they've done a lot they've sued each other. They've filed complaints against each other. They've limited public comment. They've eliminated their subcommittees, their district subcommittees, and a lot of other different things that they've done. And so that's basically, they excoriated the board and gave recommendations of how they should change. But then there was conversation, or some criticism of the grand jury. And the interesting thing about the grand jury is, in this case, this school board, what they were saying is they're dysfunctional because they have had such turnover in superintendents. I'm not sure that makes you dysfunctional by itself, right? There isn't any, I don't think any other school district has been investigated by a grand jury because they had turnover in superintendents when there was a turnover in the board. I mean, that happens. That's sort of
And,
the way.
yeah, and isn't it true that the average length of a superintendent is 3 years? Isn't
Right.
that what you said? Now that's average, which means some stay less and some stay more, but that's
Right.
not very long. So that's
No.
typical. That's typical.
No,
Yeah.
no. So in itself, that's not a problem. And the other part is, so if you want to say, well, we want to investigate you because we don't think your students are performing highly, well, you wouldn't investigate the school board for that. I mean, that's,
Exactly.
you know, and the reason they're not performing highly is not because you changed public comment or eliminated subcommittees. That's not going to have that direct impact, I don't think. I mean, I agree. I think public comment, that I totally believe in transparent and accessible public comment. And I do think that subcommittees are important access, but I don't think there's something that a grand jury should call you out on.
No, that's misplaced energy. Totally misplaced energy.
It really is a strange, it's an unusual perspective that this grand jury took. And I did think later that that's, I mean, you read it and you think, well, this is a, you know, terrible. There's no corruption charged here. There's no,
Wow.
right. And the things that they're being called incompetent for are, I don't think rise to the level of a grand jury investigation and a grand jury report.
No. Usually it's big corruption or some kind of, but that doesn't.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the and one of the articles that talks about it says that some of the complaints, so there's friction on the board. Many times you have friction on the board, and you may have tempers, but there is a different position, and particularly we've talked here about charter schools, and it's certainly about charter schools. Apparently, one of their board members is an employee of Aspire Charter Schools. So you can be an employee. You can't serve if you're an employee of the district, but you can serve. She's not an employee of the district. She's an employee of a charter network. And she has a different perspective than the other board members. And that's where the friction has been.
See, that's another law that needs to change.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate. That's not appropriate at all.
No.
Because you are linked with the district. The money comes from the taxpayer. So no, you should not be able. That's a huge conflict.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I hadn't really seen it, but that is what has happened in Stockton. And so that fact is never mentioned in their grand jury report.
Interesting. The things that people just think, oh, that's normal. No, it's not. It's
No.
not good. It's not healthy.
So there is that. And then
Okay.
and then I wanted to then there's the Orange County School Board, last school board.
Oh, yeah.
Orange County School Board and the Orange County Superintendent are both elected, as in Contra Costa. There's a separate election. The superintendent is not appointed by the county school boards, but as a separate elected official. And in Orange County, the Board of Education and the superintendent have been at odds over the years, and they had a major they have a major lawsuit that's still going on regarding an issue they didn't agree on. And one of the big issues they didn't agree on was around, well, whether or not the board and the superintendent had to share an attorney. Now, this is hard to do if you're suing each other, right? I mean, that's how it came up. And in the end, after spending $3 million on legal fees, there was a settlement that said, yes, you have to have, you are allowed to have separate lawyers.
Oh my gosh.
Right? The board doesn't have to have their lawyer appointed by the superintendent, which is what had been the thinking. So that's sort of historical background for for Orange County. But Orange County did do something really interesting, and they operated separately, because as you can see, the board and the superintendent disagree on a lot of things and operate separately on things. And what they did was the superintendent held a colloquium on ethnic studies to try to introduce the idea of ethnic studies. And we've had all the issues around critical race theory and ethnic studies. And he introduced that and at a meeting, well, I guess last week. And the board is now going to have 2 workshops on critical race theory and ethnic studies. And one of the topics that they're going to cover is opting your child out, which I think is a very interesting point, right? Well, where it's like opting your child out of history class. Why would you have that even as an option? Why would, it's different. The only thing we've ever had opt-outs before was sex education.
Sex education, that's it. Yeah.
Right?
So
this whole idea of opting out because they're teaching critical race theory, there's a whole set of issues that they're even looking at, to me, that they're even looking at that as, and what would be the process to do? Why would you even entertain that idea?
That's bizarre. Yeah. But I don't know.
The idea of holding a countywide conversation, right, in these 3 seminars, that I think is a good idea.
Yeah. That's a very good, in fact, that's a very good model, I think, for a county office. And yeah, we have been talking about that. I would like to see that happen at our county level. What I know that West Contra Costa Unified School District has been doing amazing things with, anti-bias training and, ethnic studies, curriculum. And so, I know this district has been doing a lot, and I think could benefit, the other districts in the county could benefit from that information. And there are things available at our county office that most districts don't know about in the county. So there's a lot of, like, we're holding all this stuff, this good stuff away from people and not putting the spotlight on it. So I'm really thinking that something, like a forum or what Tony Thurman did just yesterday, a summit, about equity. And I think we have a lot of really local experts on these issues. And I think, so something's still forming up here that we could use these resources that we have, because all of those issues you talked about, critical race theory, ethnic studies, opting out, anti-bias professional development. These are big, all of that's kind of the bundle of equity. And when people talk about equity, what does that mean? What's systemic? Well, these are the issues that need to be spotlighted and discussed. And then, maybe taking action. It's not enough to just say, well, we have that, go look on this, it's posted somewhere, But
it's important to see how different districts are implementing it, because that's how you learn from each other. I mean, the idea is for innovation. There are districts that have, that may have a great idea that you can tweak it. You may not pick it up and do it exactly the same way because you have a different team. Everybody's got their own different team. And that's the whole thing with teachers. Teachers, when they are teaching a curriculum, put their own twist on their curriculum, right? And I think the same thing is true with districts. And that's makes total sense, but you can't get inspired unless you know what the other guys are doing.
Yeah.
The same thing with the public now. I think that the fact that critical race theory, that ethnic studies, that this kind of curriculum is going to be, and has been stated by the Republican leaders of the strategists, that this is their wedge issue to win back control of Congress and the presidency in the upcoming elections. This is the issue they will use. Then we have to let people understand this issue and not have them be the ones who explain it.
Yes. Take the air out of that balloon, because they're misusing it, and it's talk about appropriation of,
completely. It's completely appropriation.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And yeah, so I'm always hopeful and things, when we see these kind of models happening, we'll take all the good stuff and put it together. I think we could come up with some really, and we're very I guess hopeful because of the response we've gotten from the different things that you and I have done with Between Two Teachers and the Concilio, the opting out for standardized testing, or the history of standardized testing. We got a lot of views on that. Then Othery's interview and Dr. Hurst, and people are responding. People respond and they want more information. So that really, makes us feel good. We're going in the right direction. It feels good to do that. And we're going to continue working on those things.
Yeah.
So,
And measuring our success, right? And making sure that people have actions they can take, and that we look for more to continue to take, because that's the idea. The idea is you don't just want to talk about it, then you have to say, and now how do you move this forward, and what are we going to do? So I'm thinking as our final thing, there is an action alert, and I have it on Trello, and I'll post it in the links specifically. There's a petition now to overturn the laws that ban schools that ban schools from teaching about systemic racism. So right now, these different states have put in laws basically against ethnic studies about teaching anything about systemic racism, which is like the whole idea of critical race theory, but they're expanding it even more than that. And Texas is one of the states. There's all these different states and it's obviously an expanding idea. And then the Republican Party is very, or their strategists are very excited about it. And it's at its core, it's going to keep American children from learning about their history.
Absolutely. So we, the way we fight this with truth, with honesty, with communication, and building, the trust of the truth. Really, that's how we fight against this nonsense, really.
Yeah. So I'm going to put a link to a petition, and petitions aren't the ending of the end all of everything, but nonetheless, put your name in on a side of an issue, right? And it lets you follow the issue. And I think this is really an issue worth following, and people have put petitions out there. So, and I will just tell you on other issues where we've seen petitions be very effective. Right, when somebody has put a petition up and people really do pay attention. So this petition has 52,000 supporters, and what it just says is that Republicans are banning educators from informing their students that systemic racism exists in our country. Now, backing up, critical race theory has been around for 40 years, a teaching approach that acknowledges that race is a social construct, a human invented classification system, not a biological one. And two, that racism has been built into our government's legal system and policies for centuries. But as the entire GOP agenda depends on keeping white supremacy and these systems of oppression in place, it makes sense they want to ban voters from learning about them. And so this is simply to add your name to demand that state governors overturn the laws, and the governors can do that ban critical race theory from being taught in their classrooms. Right? It's I think not enough to just saying, oh, we don't teach it. Why don't we teach it? We do teach it. If you're going to say that people were banned from buying houses in parts of East Bay because of what their race was, that's historical fact, and it was racist.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you teach that? Why would you? I mean, it's a fact.
Yeah.
Seizing native reservation lands and terminating tribal nation recognition, demolishing thriving Black communities to build public spaces, including Central Park in New York, Redlining Black neighborhoods to deny mortgage rate refinancing are just a few examples of the millions of policies that have been secured our nation's racialized legacy of inequity, far and above and beyond individual prejudice.
Yeah.
Without understanding our government's systemic racism, we will never be able to overcome it and achieve equity and justice for all. That's what this thing says.
Absolutely.
So there's the link. I'll put the link in here, and I'll also put it on all of our social media. I hope you sign it, and we can just work forward to try to elevate the truth.
That's it. That's what we're trying to do. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. All right.
That's right. See you next week.
See you next week.